Thank you, Richard. I am not speaking for the Siegel Company, and I'm only partially speaking for the conversation on coverage, because I think a few things I say will not have been developed in the context of the conversation on coverage. You heard Karen describe it a little earlier. It was an extraordinary experience where it was truly multi-partisan. People from a lot of different directions were convened to spend some time thinking through ideas about expanding coverage primarily for low and income workers. Oh, okay. And many of us were focused on, let's see what we can do about maintaining existing coverage for working people who have it today and whose benefit coverage is under threat because of, this is what we thought in the early part of the last decade. Goodness knows that was before an awful lot of things happened that greatly sharpened the threat. But we were divided. There was a group of about 75 altogether. We were divided into 3 groups to focus on specific aspects. And when the Pension Rights Center and others describe this, they talk about 75 and 45 experts as part of it. I don't want to call us experts, but they were people who were willing to spend a fair amount of time thinking and talking about these ideas. Our group was nicely and sort of poetically called Working Group 1, and we focused on basically, I could say defined benefit plans. That was what initially drew us together. I think what we were really focusing on was ideas that shared 3 characteristics that we thought were very important, desirable to maintain from a policy point of view, and spread and encourage. And those were the idea of providing people with a lifetime, an assured lifetime stream of income, broad coverage. Participation would not be optional with the individual participants, for example, and there would not be, I mean, again, the desirability of standard defined benefit plans was they did typically cover a broad part of an employer's workforce, and expert asset management that would not rely on individuals' efforts or individuals' choices. That boils down to what sounds a lot like defined benefit plans, and what I'm going to talk about today is one of the options that we put together called POP, which stood for Plain Old Pension Plan. And the concept was basically a bare bones defined benefit plan that would offer maximum predictability for employers within the bounds of the fact that it was a defined benefit plan in terms of cost, and minimum administrative complexity for employers or plan sponsors. The assumption was that these would be offered by financial institutions, which could be insurance companies, but which could be TPAs. It could be families of funds that have the capacity to aggregate and administer a large number of plans that would be extremely similar in their characteristics, highly standardized in terms of both their characteristics, their benefit characteristics, and their general investment directions, so that for groups they would be pretty relatively simple to administer. In that sense, we're talking about spreading administrative risk over a broad group, because this would be a package that would be sufficiently bare bones that would probably be primarily attractive to small and medium-sized employers. The objective of POP is to provide a reliable but very basic lifetime benefit, and it would be as widely available as it could. Now, I'll tell you frankly, personally, I found it not interesting when we were talking about the POP part of what we were doing. This was in like 2003, 2004, and I was worried about things that grew up into becoming PPA and that sort of thing. But it sounded like not a bad idea, but who would want it? But nowadays, in 2012, it becomes, in my mind, a very interesting proposition if the larger bodies that would have the capacity to offer and in particular market it could take an interest. I think this could be a very interesting way to reintroduce the sort of certainty of defined benefits on a basic basis as a second layer to Social Security, perhaps, not as the home of real comfortable retirement, the way people think of the old-fashioned defined benefit plans of yesteryear, and as mine kind of frankly offers. I was old enough, or am old enough, to take part of that. But to provide that additional layer of protection that most of us agree is a good idea beyond just Social Security. I'm thinking that we don't have the food pyramid anymore, we now have the plate, and I think we need a different graphic for the sources of retirement income, this would be part of either the circle or the upside-down pyramid or what have you. So what would be the characteristics of the POP? These are general ideas. They're all open for development. It's to point out how a discussion on developing a no-frills defined benefit plan can help with a panoply of options. Career average benefit that would be funded on a pay-as-you-go basis. The funding would follow what we at the time thought would be government-prescribed, very conservative assumptions. They might have to be even more conservative now than what we were thinking about because the government-prescribed assumptions for DB plans in general are fairly conservative. Limited past service credit. Employers could provide a bonus benefit 1 year at a time if investment or other returns justified it, but it wouldn't become a built-in part of the ongoing accrual. All employees with at least 500 hours of service would be covered, except for seasonal and certain typical other carve-out people, bargaining unit people could describe their own. No discrimination or top-heavy testing. Wouldn't be needed, actually, because the plans would be simple enough.
Judy, let me just ask you a quick question before we move on to Rich.
Okay.
And that is, if we think about this, the way the POP works is the employer is funding a benefit under very conservative assumptions. So there's a minimum guaranteed benefit that's provided. You almost have investment gains built in to the expectation because of the conservative assumptions. And if you do get those investment gains, then the employer has the option under POP to actually increase benefits or to use them to cut down future contributions, correct?
Yes, that would be one of the important risk-sharing features. Another possibility, this was not the conversation on coverage. I do want to take just an extra minute to mention this. If this were funded as and invested as conservatively as it might be, almost as a return to the old group deferred annuity sort of concept, you might not even have PBGC guarantees. You might not even have termination liability. There could be employee risk sharing at the end. It would be funded as benefits accrue, even past service to the extent it's allowed, would be funded on an accruing basis along with future service benefits. And if an employer terminated or went out of business, there might not be any makeup for the people who had earned benefits during that time. Hopefully, if this is in one of these multiple employer kind of group arrangements, there might be enough room for portability among the different employers who've signed up. Even with different institutions, it might be sufficiently standardized that there could be room for portability among the different employers that subscribe to these entities, so that there could be a way to pick up the cost among future employers. But one other, again, thing to think about is moving this to one where the risk sharing is kind of at the end rather than all along. So that again, it's one idea, and it's a way to integrate a defined benefit concept into some of the more exotic ideas that are coming along.
Thank you, Judy. I appreciate that. Rich, do you